Good evening, beautiful people. So, you might be wondering, why is they have stand up, sit down, bow, lay down, all these different physical postures they take during the prayer. Posture is something that we see talked about probably more in prayer than we do in life. And that's kind of where I'm going to go today, but just in general, what does our posture mean? Posture is something that we should be thinking about intentionally, I think. And posture means a lot. When you're talking to somebody, how they carry themselves, how they're using their hands, their facial expressions, how their shoulders are turned toward you or not, influences how they take you. Whether you realize it or not, it could be a subconscious thing too, but when somebody's holding a posture that's standoffish or holding a posture that indicates lack of interest or something like that versus being totally interested, totally engaged. And so why, when we go to participate in acts of worship or reverence, do we not think about it just as intentionally? I know sometimes we do, but I want to encourage us to think about it a little bit more. So I'm going to go through a few different types of posture that we think about, and kind of what they've been taken to mean, and just as something to think about and something to consider as you go forth and practice. So I have this really cool site, Institute in Basic Life Principles, that I'm going to be taking some of this stuff from. And it's talking about understanding postures of prayer and letting your posture express the attitude of your heart. There's so many different postures of prayer taken in the Bible. You've got Abraham falling on his face before God. You've got Moses praying with his hands outstretched. King Solomon kneeling in prayer. Jesus praying looking up to heaven, right? We have all these different things. And so we're going to go into a few different ones. So first of all, there's lying prostrate before God. Lying prostrate, literally laying on your face down. I know this is a pretty hard position to take, and probably one of the more uncomfortable ones to take, but that's why it's more meaningful in a way. It's an act of total submission. It's an act of giving yourself fully to what you're lying before. Partially because it's one of the more uncomfortable ones, but partially because you are totally in that person's control when you're laying before them like that, right? I think about youth group games. That was one of the more terrifying positions to take around your youth pastor because you knew that they were up to something if they had you laying in that position, because there's nothing you can do, right? So the act of laying prostrate, is an act of total submission. Next position, kneeling before God. This is more of a position we take acknowledging lordship, acknowledging kingliness, right? You see this in especially medieval cultures, or European medieval cultures, where you go and you kneel before the person and you stay kneeling when in their presence, in an act of you're in charge and you have control over my life. It's not quite as submissive as laying prostrate, right? But it is acknowledging that they're in control and that you are here to listen to what they have to say, and acknowledging lordship, right? Then there's bowing before the Lord. Now that's one that you don't hold that position. You bow and then you resume another posture, usually. The length of a bow might change, but usually it's a temporary posture, right? But one that's also very meaningful. It's a sign of reverence, and also kind of a sign of lordship. It's a sign that the person that you're bowing to holds a position higher than you. It's one that not necessarily you'd only do to a lord or to a ruler, right? But it is expressing that you are in control. You are higher than me in this situation. The next one, standing before the Lord. This one is one that's less submissive. So previously we kind of just talked about ones that are more submissive, right? whereas standing is more of a standing upright and tall and proud. That's a position that is less submissive, but also one that we're called to do as well. Not necessarily in his presence per se, but he does call us to advocate on his behalf. He calls us to stand proud in his name, to stand, to speak proudly of our faith, right? So the posture of standing proud, standing ready for battle, standing in readiness is one that we think about as a symbol of pride. And not all pride is bad. There's pride talked about in the Bible as the root of all evil, or one of the roots of all evil. There's lots of roots of evil, but there's healthy pride too. There's pride in something that's worth being proud of, and our faith is one of those things. Next one is sitting around the Lord. Sitting is a position of comfort. It's sometimes leisurely. It doesn't mean sitting upright in a nice posture usually. We think about it as kind of a lounging or kind of a, it's a position of comfort. And it's a position we see disciples take of Jesus. They come and sit and listen to him. Unless they're in like huge crowds, we see a couple instances where they're standing, but usually they're sitting around him, listening to him preach and teach, and in comfort, total comfort with the situation. Sitting implies you're going to be there for a while. Sitting implies that you're settling in a little bit and you're comfortable with the situation. And so, it's a posture we take when we're comfortable. And then next posture, looking up to heaven. So this one, there isn't exactly a super concrete proof that like heaven is above us, right? That's the going theory of where heaven is, but we could take a spaceship to eternity and probably not find heaven. It's its own place, right? But we look up to heaven usually is how we express that. It expresses that we're seeking him. It expresses that we're looking to talk directly to him, because that's where we have this consciousness that he is, right? So looking up, that's something we do when we want to talk more directly, when we want to hear from him, when we want to express that we want to have a conversation, right? We want to make it a two-way thing. That's really important with this posture, is we make it a two-way thing. I think sometimes we forget that that's important. Another posture really similar to that looking up to heaven one is stretching forth the arm. We see this when we raise our hands in worship. I know all of us Church of God people, getting our hands to move during worship is quite challenging, but it's not a bad thing. I know a lot of us were raised with a more staunch approach to worship, but raising your hands is not a bad thing, and it's a comfort thing, I know. But raising your arms is a probably extension of that looking up to heaven thing. It's not just talking to God or expressing intent to talk to God, it's reaching out. It's saying, I want you. It's a desire thing, right? You're reaching out for something. You're reaching out for something that you believe is there. And it's appealing to his power. It's appealing to what's up there. Something's there, and so you're reaching out in hopes that you'll receive it. It can be a symbol of petitioning as well, of desperation. I am doing everything in my power to get God to answer me, right? When we reach up our hands. And then the last posture, leaping for joy. I know leaping gets harder and harder as we get older. I know I have all sorts of aches and pains that I experience even as a 25-year-old. I'm going to probably regret laying in this position because getting up is going to take me 10 minutes or more. But leaping for joy is something that I think as we get older becomes harder to imagine ourselves doing. Children do this all the time. And God calls us to a childlike faith, right? And leaping for joy doesn't have to literally mean jumping. It can mean like just reaching your hands up and just like pumping fists in the air and shouting and things like that as well. And that's a position that God calls us to. He calls us to be joyful in our faith. He calls us to be joyful in life. We're not called to be miserable. We're told that we might be a little bit unhappy here on earth, but we should also have joy in the things that he gives us, because he gives us a lot. He gives us all sorts of things. So he gives us the immense creation we live in. So that's my last posture I want to talk about. We've got all these postures to think about. And I'm just going to talk about physical postures today. We'll save mental and emotional postures for another day. But I want you guys to think about, as we go forward into the week, about what your posture's saying to those around you, to God as you pray, to God as you worship. Just be more intentional about it. Intentionality is really important to God and to us as well. It speaks volumes about what you're doing. Like if you're carrying a posture without the intent behind it, it doesn't mean nearly as much. But posture helps us become more intentional, I think. If we take a posture, like you can't take a position of being prostrate and not be intentional about it, because it's such a submissive position, for example. So posture helps us a lot with that. So go forth into this week. Think about it, mull it over, try to engage in that as best as you can. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.